we're going to go over some polling numbers. BSU, the Boise State University, for the past 8 or 9 years has been conducting what they call this sort of Idaho-wide get a sense of what the folks are feeling about political issues, social issues, economic issues, the direction of the state. If we're headed in the right direction, in the wrong direction. And they've been doing this for a while, and it appears that when these results come out, that there is a sense that this is what everybody believes, and then the political winds sort of shift in that direction. I'd rather just, instead of analyze it here ourselves, I wanted to bring in Branden Durst, who is a former legislator in Idaho, and among other things, the man gets involved in a lot of good things in the state for our values and such. And so it's a pleasure to bring Branden on here to dive into these numbers. Branden, welcome to the program. Can you do a better explanation than I did on what this what the intent of this survey is for?
Sure. So thanks for having me on. Just as background, I ran a public policy survey research company for a long time. In fact, my former business partner, Greg Hill, was the first person at Boise State to start this survey in his position as the director of the Policy Institute at Boise State. This was his survey to start off with. And so we've been following this for a long time. This survey is intended to kind of get a snapshot of where Idahoans are on any given issue that's facing the state. And we can get into more detail about why this misses the mark and why it's really not a reliable measure for policymakers or for the public to look at when it comes to where we are in terms of our feelings and attitudes towards certain issues.
Yeah. Okay. So then, why don't we dive into what BSU is and whoever does the poll for them or with them? Who are they reaching? Who are they reaching out to? Because when we think of polling, we think of presidential polls and election polls, like who are the voters, who are the people on this side, on that side, and where the sense is. So give us the sense of who these people, what we're reaching here.
Yeah. So that was actually one of the areas that I first identified from the methodology standpoint that was particularly concerning in this particular survey. Most policy surveys look to ask questions of at least registered voters, people who have the capacity to impact, our republic through their vote. And oftentimes that's narrowed down even further to people who are likely to vote. This survey didn't do that. In fact, this survey did something that's quite unusual and frankly probably it was absolutely not best practice, and that is that they questioned anyone who was living in Idaho. They didn't look at whether or not someone was legally allowed to be in Idaho. You could have people that were illegally in Idaho and they could be participating in this survey. They could be a college student that happened to be living in a dorm in Boise or in Moscow or someplace, but be a resident of a different state. They just said, "Are you living here?" And that is problematic because it doesn't really represent the people that are helping make the decisions and elect our folks for our republic to make those decisions on our behalf.
Okay, and it looks as though they polled around 1,000 or so people.
Yeah.
Is that generally a good number?
That's actually about twice as high as you really need to be for a statewide survey. There's a thing called the law of large numbers. Basically, the more respondents you get, the less likely to impact the outcome you are. And really, in a statewide survey of registered voters, that number is around 450 total respondents to get, what would be considered the industry standard of 5% margin of error, plus or minus, with a 95% confidence interval. That's about 450 is about where you hit that point in Idaho surveys. With 1,000, that's a lot. But if you're polling the wrong people, it doesn't matter how many of them you poll, you're still getting bad data.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Well, with that being said, one of the top line questions that they asked was the direction of the state. Where do you think our state is moving in the right direction or the wrong direction? And depending on where you are in your own life, sometimes that's what really dictates it. We see here for the first time that the wrong track has overtaken the right track. And the unsures have increased over the last 10 years or so. But what can you tell us about this question? Let's dive into this one.
So just from a really high level, I don't like questions like this because they aren't particularly meaningful, because they don't explain, at least initially, they don't explain why. Now, they did dig deeper. They said, well, why is it on the wrong track? And I think that's pretty illuminating, related to the respondents that they're getting, which I don't think are representative of the Idaho electorate. But
right, let's bring. I think we have that slide. Let's bring up that. Why do you think we're going in the wrong direction? And we can look at that, what those respondents said.
yeah,
The number one here is too conservative, or a Republican majority. The cost of living, Californians coming in,
yeah, man.
politicians and leadership, or it's too liberal, or it's becoming too liberal. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel attacked. But the thing with these questions is that we always tell clients, when you ask a question like this, what do you want to know? How is it actionable? This isn't an actionable question. It is what it is. But I think at the end of the day, it speaks to the fact that this poll probably isn't representative, and it also it says, what about it being too conservative? Clearly the Democrats think this is why, right? They don't like living in a state that's conservative. Well, great, but if you're not a voter, or that is what it is. So
Right.
I'm not sure how useful it is.
Well, then conversely, for the folks that thought we were headed in the right direction, what I found interesting here was that the top two actually kind of confirmed. The top one also confirms. The top three actually kind of confirm each other, right? I mean, we are a conservative majority state, so people overall love the state, love Idaho.
Yeah.
The conservative, that we're a conservative state, was number two, and also the leadership in politics, which is conservative and Republican, I guess you could say. I mean, all those three kind of like line up there, right?
Yeah, and that's where you see this divergence in the opinion of the respondents. But
Yeah.
Again, I'm not a huge fan of this sort of right track, wrong track question, just because I don't think it's particularly illuminating. Although I do appreciate that they kind of delved down a little bit to figure out why.
Right. Okay. I want to take a short break and come back and let you take off on some of your other findings and what you think is important about polling in general and this kind of poll here. So stick around, everybody. We'll be right back.